Hello, welcome to my last vlog. Before final week approaches, I wanted to make sure that I kind of just took care of myself and supported myself by taking a shower, washing my hair, eating M&Ms right now. So right now I'm going to be talking about how I can support my students. So I'm going to be talking about two different disciplines and about different reading and writing tools that I can implement in my class to help support my students in using disciplinary-based literacy and language practices. So in general, it's important to note that as educators, we cannot expect our students to come into our classrooms at the beginning of the year and automatically be aware of the vocabulary that we are going to use. And it's very possible that they may also not know prerequisite knowledge. And Zygurus Co. even states in their text, students will not arrive at your classroom doorstep automatically knowing the vocabulary that matters in your discipline. So it's important that we do everything we can to support them in developing that vocabulary and disciplinary based literacy, knowledge, and language before we dive into understanding the content at a deeper level. So the disciplines that I will be talking about today are going to be math and language arts. The reading and writing tools that I will be talking about in terms of the things I want to implement in those classrooms are going to be from Zygurus Co. because Zygurus Co. gives a lot of great models and examples for how students can practice with the language. And a quote that they mentioned that I think is really important to note is, multiple exposures to words in meaningful ways will result in students not only knowing what a word means, but also how to use that word in a variety of contexts, and how to use the word's meaning in order to understand the word in a different context and or combination with other ideas. So basically, multiple exposures to the words, tons of practice with the words is very important to get a good grasp of those knowledge goals. And then therefore from there, once they practice with it, get comfortable with the methods and techniques that they like, we could get into learning more about the subject itself. First, I'm going to be talking about math, reading, and writing tools that I want to use to support my students in using disciplinary literacy and language practices. So in general, from being a math major and being in the discipline for a while, I know that learning math terminology could be extremely complicated, especially since a lot of math language can have multiple meanings. For example, function, rate, multiple, odds, set, combination, and stuff like that. And math also involves a lot of analyzing proofs, seeking connections, reading word problems, and having to translate that into symbols to solve for a variable and what it means. And so a lot of this, or all of it, involves reading and writing down math in order to solve problems, in order to answer to a certain mathematical prompt. In terms of reading strategies I want to implement to support my students, I thought that Zygurus Co. strategy in 7.16, which is the determining essential versus non-essential information strategy, I think using this as a homework assignment or an assignment that we use in class, it causes students to pick out essential information from a given word problem, and then students have to figure out which information is important and which information isn't important. And then from there, the questions that it asks, like, okay, which numbers do we need, which numbers we don't need, that helps the students organize the information and decipher which words mean what and why that matters in solving the problem. And then this leads students in to write the equation based on what is important. The other writing tool that I think would be really good is, as I said dozens and dozens of times in this class, is implementing word walls and or graphic organizers around the classroom that help with word association and that help students connect symbols and words and or meanings together, so that while they're reading material, they can look up at the wall and refer to what's in front of them, so that they can easily then translate, oh yeah, pi is the ratio of the circumference and radius of a circle, or pi is 3.14, or just the symbol pi means pi. And so that can help students read text and then do assessments, and then if they need to refer to something that we've learned, it's already posted on the wall for them, so that they don't have to sit there and not know what to do, but then they have that extra help in solving whatever problem they have to solve. So in terms of writing, I really like Zagreus' Code Table 7.15. It is the keywords for converting problems to equation strategy, and it requires students to write down a word, then they have to explain the word, then they have to use it in a sentence, and then they have to convert it to symbols and numbers. And I think that this would be really cool because it requires students to write it down in words, write the symbol, write the numbers, and they have to physically write down the stuff as they're learning it. I think this would be a great thing, again, to implement when students have to read a text and then they have to take notes on it, or as we're going through class and learning about it, they can always refer back to that table. And secondly, I think Zagreus' Code Table for 7.19, using math journals, I think is awesome. And I know I mentioned this in another vlog. Having students have the opportunity to write down anything they want about the math that we're learning. They can write a problem down and solve it. They can talk about what confuses them, what they think they're really good at, what they want a deeper understanding of. They can write a problem down and then have to verbally explain how to solve it if they don't want to use numbers. They could talk about different solution strategies they'd have to solving the problem. And then students can even compare answers the next day depending on the prompt. But this also, I think, gives students the freedom to write down whatever they want. And therefore, if I were to check in on what they were writing, then I have a better understanding about where they're at. But it also gives students the opportunity to write something related to math down, and then they can work with practicing that. On the other hand, for English language arts, even though I'm not super involved in that discipline, I've been learning from Zagreus Co. what that discipline entails. And to my understanding of what I've learned, it involves a lot of reading different genres, analyzing different genres of text, analyzing the purpose of why an author wrote something, the different meanings that details in a story has. It can involve poetic analysis, it can involve rhetoric and stuff like that. So in terms of reading strategies that I would implement in an English language arts classroom, I think that it's really important to at least expose my students to a variety of different genres, such as horror, scientific fiction, tall tale, historical fiction, short stories, drama, humorous stories, poetry, and those are just a few of the genres that are out there. And I think it's important to do this because language usage can be manipulated to express certain perspectives in unique ways depending on the authors, and just being exposed to all the different genres can help them in the discipline later on, because if you only read one genre, you're not used to reading about how people wrote at different time periods. You're not getting used to just the uniqueness in writing between each author and what type of genre they prefer to write. And I think it would also be cool if students aren't very comfortable reading aloud in a classroom, then they can read with peers. We can go over terminology if it's challenging as I read the story to the class instead of asking them to read it individually and hopping off each other, because I know that can create a lot of anxiety. And then secondly, I really like table 7.10, which is the main idea strategy. And this strategy instructs students to break down the text, and it asks different questions like, who's the character? What's this detail? What's this detail? And then they have to answer all the questions, and it helps them kind of break down the plot and just get the basic main points out of there so that they don't necessarily have to worry about the fluffy details, but they just have to get an understanding of what is being read, and therefore they can go about interpreting the text from what they know from that table. In terms of writing, similar to the reading strategy about exposing students to different genres, I think it's important to instruct students to write in different formats and respond to different types of prompts with different purposes. So students will be doing research papers. They may have to write personal essays and anecdotes. They may have to write an informative paper, a persuasive paper, maybe a literary review of another book, rhetorical analysis, a simple summary, process analysis, etc. I think this will definitely prepare them for higher education and for things that they'll have to pursue later on if they want to go into that professional discipline for a career. That way, students can practice being different types of authors who are writing for different purposes, and they can be exposed to like different tones they have to portray and the different types of writing that they're producing. And secondly, in terms of writing, I think it would be really good to implement the idea that we did in class with the pamphlets with different prompts. So I think it'd be cool to give each student a pamphlet with a different prompt. And some prompt could be, here's a quote, what does it mean to you? Or here's a poem, point out specific words that influence the tone. Or it may give a book title that we've read in class, or a small short story that we've read in class, and it may ask students to summarize it. And then students will write the responses in the journal, and they can share the ideas with others. And I think that would be great, because if we were to do this every day, then each student would be able to answer a different prompt. They wouldn't be great on it. It would just give them the time to either warm up their brains or gather their ideas based on the prompt that is given to them. And then they can share their ideas with other students, and then students will hear other people's ideas, and therefore students can learn a lot from what their peers have to say. And it also gives them a space to physically write something down that may not be as challenging as an essay. In conclusion, language is a huge thing in any discipline. And it's really important that when students come into our classroom, we are welcoming of any knowledge about that specific discipline terminology that they possess. Even if they barely have any, that is still okay. It means that there's more opportunity for them to learn that terminology. It's important that in general, we have a very welcoming environment and creative environment that is extremely supportive in students learning that language and developing that disciplinary literacy and language practice. And it's important that throughout the year we continue to support students and scaffold them in different ways so that they can improve on their writing and reading skills for that specific discipline. And of course, there are many other ways to do it other than the ones that I mentioned, but the tables from Zygurus Co. that really spoke out to me, and I could see students really enjoying them. I think it'd also be really cool to give students a choice on which reading and writing tools to use. So then they have their preferred way of writing or preferred way of breaking down text, and therefore they don't maybe feel as stressed out in taking notes, but they're still learning the language practices and discipline-based literacy as the year moves forward. Thank you so much for watching all my vlogs and seeing me journey through my weekend. I hope you have a wonderful summer, and I hope you learned a little bit more about my understanding of the content.